in elementary school where my daughter goes to school, I'm like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, that's insane. And so that statistic for me, while being a problematic metric in some ways, is deeply motivating for me. And then these other things, so we have 5 zip codes without grocery stores. And this is a real big challenge. Everybody knows the term food desert. It's a great term in that it has, in the last 10 years, helped a lot of people understand that there's a correlation between the built environment and public health. Beyond that, food deserts is a really problematic term. For one, generally there's no deserts in Austin. Generally deserts imply that there's a total lack of something, and we know, if you've ever been to Austin, there's just very few parts of Austin that lack anything. It's what I call a liability-focused metric as opposed to an asset-based metric. That just because the entire Del Valley ISD, which is 175 square miles, doesn't have a grocery store, which is a serious problem, doesn't necessarily mean that there's nothing great there. And when you say food desert, it kind of implies that, there's really nothing of value there. There's amazing stuff happening all over Southeast Austin. Amazing people, a ton of great farmers, a ton of great farm workers, but they don't have any grocery stores. And that's a really complicated equation. We're working on that. But we're also, while trying to incentivize grocery stores to move into these zip codes without grocery stores, recognizing that when we, the city, incentivizes a grocery store to move into a food desert, we're going to destabilize that neighborhood. What does that mean? So a grocery store, if you mention that a grocery store might be coming to a neighborhood, you increase property values. Fantastic, great, woohoo! Unless you're paying rent. And when that property value goes up, your rent goes up. You don't get any advantages of the property values going up, but you have to pay more rent. So if we're trying to get grocery stores into low-income neighborhoods or areas that are food deserts, getting a grocery store into that neighborhood or supporting the development of a grocery store in that neighborhood is going to destabilize the neighborhood. It's most likely going to cause a lot of the people that you're hoping will be able to access that grocery store to have to move out of the neighborhood. So, policy is complicated. We don't know all of the answers, but we do know we cannot just simply look at food deserts in isolation. We have to think about the relationship between the built environment and access to social service programs like affordable housing. We have to think about food deserts in terms of public transportation. We have to think about food deserts in terms of access to sidewalks, usable sidewalks, not just a sidewalk, but what about a tree-lined sidewalk? What about all of the different things that make it possible for a low-income community member to access the kind of food that's culturally appropriate, that's affordable. So what if you drop a Whole Foods into East Austin? Whole Foods is great. I love Whole Foods. I shop there all the time. But I'm pretty lucky. I've got a pretty good job, and I prioritize really, good food over a lot of other things. A Whole Foods being dropped into a food desert is not going to address any of the issues, except perhaps job development, which is important. But it's not going to address the actual issue of food access. So we're trying to work on a couple of other things simultaneously. And maybe this is just a little map, in case you're not familiar with Austin. This is basically a map of our city boundaries with the highlighted colors showing where we know there is food insecurity based on people calling our United Way hotline to ask about how to get help addressing their inability to access healthy, affordable food. So this is not speculation. I like this map because this is like somebody picked up the phone and said, hey, I need to feed my family today. What can I do? So it's real world data. But it's an interesting illumination of what we already know about Austin. Very quickly, what you're seeing basically is the divide in East and West Austin. So in 1928, Austin created the first comprehensive plan, which was pretty progressive at the time. Austin said, we need to have some kind of vision of where the city's going to go. And so a bunch of white bearded men like me decided, well, we're just going to draw a line down the middle of the city, and white people are going to live over here, and everybody else is going to live over there. And you might be able to guess what side the white people moved to, and what side the non-white people moved to. 100 years later, what you see is the manifestation of institutional racism. And it's really powerful when you think about the southeast corner of Austin has no grocery stores. And 100 years ago, somebody decided that we're going to prioritize having white residential people live on this side and non-white industrial move to this side. So what we're trying to do with the city of Austin is think about, okay, this is a pretty heavy subject, this is pretty complicated, and we need to think long and hard about what we can do from
an incentivization program point of view to address the deep divide. So what we're doing, first of all, is a thing called a food environment analysis. And you can't really see this map very well, but we wanted to know, okay, where is food retail currently? We don't actually have a map. And on top of that, we don't really know what each one of the food retail locations looks like. So we borrowed some ideas and strategies from the city of Baltimore and some good work they did in combination with Johns Hopkins, and basically developed a healthy food availability index. So we got the data collectors to go around and implement a survey at every single food retail location in Austin. It's about 960 stores. So my grad student from UT developed an app, and the data collectors are able to go to each store and basically punch in their phone what kind of food's available, what's the price point, what's the quality, what's the sort of general overall feeling of the store, what's the general layout of the store in relationship to the neighborhood. What we want to know is, does the store basically provide good food to the people that live in the community? What we're going to do now, we just finished the data collection process, is we're going to aggregate that data into city council districts. And we're going to be able to overlay demographic information about household income, transportation, other things. And we're going to basically be able to show a much more accurate picture of food deserts. Basically taking the term food deserts and taking it away from the USDA and creating our own deeper dive into what's the real picture, street by street, not just zip code by zip code, not census tract by census tract, but street by street. What's the reality for people living in various parts of Austin in terms of equitable access to healthy, affordable food? We feel like having this data is a really essential starting point. Now that said, we're also doing a behavioral survey because we know most low-income families travel tremendous distances to get to food. There are many grocery stores in proximity to a lot of low-income multifamily housing communities in Austin. But we know people will get a taxi, they'll borrow a car, they'll do everything short of taking the bus to get to the grocery store. I'll circle back to the bus piece in a second. So people value affordability or price point value of their food. They value cultural appropriateness and just a general sense of getting access to quality food. So if there's a grocery store down the street from you, but the food is kind of not so great looking because it's kind of rotten, you're not going to go there. And you're not going to go there if you walk in and don't feel comfortable. Culturally, you don't feel like you see people that look like you. And if you feel like it's not a good value, it's not the right price point. So those things drive people's decisions on where to shop as much as simple proximity. So what we're working on right now is the proximity piece and the quality piece. The behavioral surveys are going to help us understand overall patterns. What we're hoping to do essentially is be able to paint a picture that there's certain places in Austin that don't have good access, physical access to healthy, affordable food. We're going to overlay sidewalk infrastructure with this map to basically show where there are sidewalks and where there are not sidewalks, with the hope of being able to prioritize future investments in things like sidewalks, in things like potential incentives for healthy food retail, and incentives for other kind of infrastructure to make sure that physical access is not a barrier to accessing healthy, affordable food. We recognize that that's not going to solve this broader problem, but we do think that poverty is a correlation between time and money. That if we can make it easier for communities to access the kind of food that they want to access, that lowers the amount of time that they have to spend, which is a way to address poverty basically on the backside. We'll be done with this summer. We're going to be publishing these maps on our website this summer. Our grad student's going to be writing her thesis on this. We're going to be publishing that this fall. Hopefully, at some point in the near future, we'll be able to share this with the general public, broken down by city council districts. And we hope that this work gets replicated in other cities. We hope that we'll be able to help other cities do the same kind of work. Our office is invested in this. It hasn't been a substantial investment, but nevertheless, an investment. I think it's a priority. Simultaneously, we're working on a whole series of ways to get better food into communities now. So it's basically immediate intervention. So we're supporting the development of school farm stands, mobile farmers markets, and healthy corner stores. None of these are going to address the overarching and underlying issues of poverty, but we do think that given the reality that so many people in Austin don't simply have a place to get good, affordable, culturally appropriate food today, that this is a simple, easy investment. We're excited about healthy corner stores as a way of not basically gentrifying neighborhoods while improving access to food. It's a little different thought than incentivizing, say, a grocery store. If we can just simply get better food into the stores that are there now, we might have some
some success. It's really challenging to do this. That said, every single store owner we've talked to has said, yes, I understand, like healthy food needs to be in my store. I know how to sell cigarettes and beer. I don't really know how to sell tomatoes and lettuce. Help me. So we're trying to incentivize and trying to support, from a business consultation point of view, that shift. We're also looking at nutritious food incentive programs. How do you just simply reduce the cost of food? We're most likely going to do this in a couple of ways. This is a national program, but there's lots and lots of different ways to look at it. You probably know about the Double Dollar program or something like that, where if you have eligibility for SNAP, you can use your SNAP dollar to get $2 worth of fresh produce at a farmer's market. We're trying to take that and insert it into a grocery store or into a corner store. The challenge with this is going back to poverty is time and money. When you put the burden of participation in a program like this on the low-income population, you're actually exacerbating poverty. You're saying, hey, low-income person, you need to jump through a couple of more steps to get good food, as opposed to the opposite, where you're taking away steps, you're making it easy, you're removing barriers for the low-income population to get this kind of food. So that said, we're excited about the Nutritious Food Incentive Program, some kind of rebate program at healthy corner stores, maybe full-service grocery store. Basically, when you use your SNAP dollar at the grocery store, you'll get some kind of either discount or rebate or incentive to purchase more fresh, healthy food. That said, the long-term play here, and this is maybe, well, I'll go in for a couple more minutes. How do we look at inverting the current structure of our food system in America from subsidizing bad food to subsidizing good food? Currently, we subsidize corn, sugar, soybeans, all good things in moderation. Why aren't we subsidizing fresh fruits and vegetables?
Amen.
I don't know. I think part of the problem is that we call fresh fruits and vegetables specialty foods. You guys know that from the USDA, specialty crops? I think it's insane. I think first of all, like, let's call it like good food. Let's not call it special. It's just good food. So what we're hoping to do is look at, is there a role for the municipality in subsidizing locally produced, high quality, transparent, fresh fruits and vegetables? I don't know. Maybe it's insane, maybe it's not. Maybe if more municipalities started asking these questions and looking at ways to basically offset the cost of local, transparent, equitably produced fresh fruits and vegetables, the US government would take this sort of question a little bit more seriously. So I'm going to touch on this. This is a fantastic slide. I love this one. Really good one to leave on. So you guys all know the stats about food waste. Eric touched on it earlier. Michael touched on it as well. We produce way more food than we need. There's a paradigm, there's this conversation in the world that I'm sure you've all heard it. How are we going to feed 9 billion people? How are we, white men, going to feed you? Major framing problem. People don't need to be fed. People need to have the resources to feed themselves. So that said, we throw away a lot of food, and that's a major environmental issue. I have an issue with thinking through food waste in correlation with food insecurity. I don't think that low-income populations need to be fed this. And I don't think that any of my friends that are working really hard on food recovery intend that to be the way that it's thought of. But if you don't frame these things correctly, if you don't think through how you're talking about these issues, you can end up thinking, well, it's food waste. I mean, and there's hungry people, so just get the waste to the hungry people. So first of all, that's insane. Second of all, it's a vulnerability issue that most low-income communities that are food insecure are seniors and children, the most vulnerable population in terms of health or foodborne illnesses. Generally speaking, food recovery pushes the spectrum of food safety a little bit, a lot more than, say, other kinds of food. So we just have to be really careful when we frame the conversation around food recovery. That said, throwing away 40% of our food is absolutely insane as well. So we're throwing away 200 million pounds of food here in Austin, which just completely blows my mind. We know that there's a direct correlation between rotting food that's buried in greenhouse gas and global warming. So we're very interested in addressing long-term climate change in terms of organic waste. We should not be burying good food, obviously, and we shouldn't be burying anything that's organic. So we're looking at curbside recycling, curbside organic diversion. We think it's a really good thing. We're trying to roll that out across the city. It's a really complicated equation, but nevertheless, it's a really good and important function of a municipal government. But we're also looking at this hierarchy of food waste. Feed hungry people. Yes, very important. That said, go back to the framing conversation.